The obsidian walls of the Grand Synod of the Ethelgardian Empire did not reflect light so much as they swallowed it, drinking the luminescence of the nebula-infused star system outside the transparency fields and hoarding it within the deep geological memory of the stone. This was a chamber designed to intimidate, a vast hollow sphere located at the apex of the orbital spire known as the Crown of Silence, where the oxygen was kept deliberately thin and the gravity tuned to a crushing weight that only the elite warrior caste could withstand with dignity. It was here, amidst the floating anti-grav platforms and the hum of atmospheric scrubbers, that High Exarch Moloch stood, his four-armed frame draped in the ceremonial weave of hyperdense spider silk, his chitinous carapace gleaming under the harsh, cold lights of the council ring. He was not a creature accustomed to hesitation. His species, the Ethelgard, were apex predators of a high-gravity world, evolved for burst speed, overwhelming force, and the immediate brutal dominance of any kinetic engagement. They did not ponder, they struck. They did not negotiate, they dictated. Yet in this moment, looking down at the data slate that hovered within the magnetic field of his lower manipulator claw, Moloch felt a sensation that was entirely alien to his physiology. He felt a cold, creeping vibration in his thoracic cavity. He felt uncertainty. The silence in the Grand Synod was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed against the sensory tendrils of the 300 counselors gathered in the tiered shadows. They were waiting for his command, waiting for the authorization to burn the new stellar charts into the navigation computers of the Warswarm, waiting to expand the borders of the Empire into the region of space known only as the Void of Dust. But Moloch could not speak, for the slate he held contained a transmission recovered from a derelict beacon, a device so ancient its atomic structure had begun to decay into lead, found drifting on the very edge of that silent, empty sector. The message was not from the humans. It was about them. It was a warning left by the Vorax, a species the Ethelgard had conquered and assimilated 3,000 cycles ago. The Vorax had been mighty, a civilization of starforgers and genetic architects, yet they had vanished from the galactic stage long before the Ethelgard rose to power, leaving only ruins and warnings. Moloch's compound eyes adjusted, focusing on the translation that scrolled across the holographic interface, the glyphs burning themselves into his mind. "Do not wake the sleepers in the dust," the translation read, the syntax archaic and filled with a trembling reverence that the translator algorithm struggled to parse. "Do not strike the soft flesh. They are not warriors as you know war. They are the entropy. They are the long march. If you draw their blood, they will not just kill you. They will hunt you. They will hunt you across the curves of time, past the death of stars, until your history is dust and your name is forgotten. They are the dominion of the end. Leave them to their silence." Moloch exhaled, a sharp hiss of nitrogen-rich air escaping his mandibles. The sheer melodrama of the ancient warning offended him. It reeked of superstition, of the cowardly myths that weak species invented to justify their fear of the unknown. The Vorax had likely destroyed themselves with some failed experiment and blamed a boogeyman in the dark to save face in their historical archives. And yet the humans, this new, soft, unimposing species that had recently been detected establishing mining outposts on the fringe of the void, matched the biological description in the archives perfectly. Bipedal, endoskeletal, lacking natural armor, lacking claws, possessing slow reflexes compared to the Ethelgard. They looked like prey. They looked like something that existed solely to be consumed by the strong. "The Exarch hesitates," a voice sliced through the silence, sharp and discordant. It was Sub-Commander Krail, a younger, more aggressive member of the warrior caste, his carapace scarred from the border wars with the reptilian collectives. Krail floated his podium forward, invading the central space reserved for the High Exarch, a breach of protocol that would have resulted in immediate execution in past cycles. But the tension in the room had frayed the edges of tradition. "The fleet stands ready at the Zenith Gate. The target systems are rich in heavy isotopes, essential for the construction of the new dreadnoughts. The inhabitants are few. Their technology is primitive, relying on kinetic ballistics and crude fusion drives. Why do we pause? Why do we let the ghosts of a dead species dictate the expansion of the living empire?" Krail's voice amplified, echoing off the obsidian walls, stirring a murmur of agreement among the lower tiers. The lust for conquest was a chemical imperative for the Ethelgard, denying. It caused physical pain, a buildup of aggression hormones that demanded release. They saw the humans not as a threat, but as a resource, a minor obstacle to be swept aside in the glorious march of destiny. Moloch lowered the slate, his mandibles clicking together in a rhythm of annoyance. He looked at Krail, seeing the foolishness of youth, the blindness of one who had never known defeat. "This is not a ghost story, Sub-Commander," Moloch rumbled, his voice deep, vibrating through the floor plates. "This is intelligence. The Vorax were not fools. They possessed technology that we still struggle to reverse engineer. If they feared this dominion, there was a reason. We do not survive by charging blindly into the maw of a singularity." "We survive by strength," Krail roared, raising a fist. "We survive by taking. These humans are soft. I have seen the scans. They have no warrior caste. They allow their young and their infirm to dictate policy. They value individual life over the glory of the state. Such a species is a biological error, a mistake that the galaxy waits for us to correct. Let me take the vanguard, just the vanguard. I will burn their outposts, seize the isotopes, and bring you their leaders in chains before the rotation of this station is complete." The Synod erupted in a cacophony of clicking and cheering, the warlust spreading like a contagion. Moloch felt the tide turning against him. Logic was losing to instinct. He looked at the warning again, the phrase, "hunt you forever," lingering in his mind. It seemed impossible. Biology dictated that energy was finite. No predator hunted forever. Eventually, the cost of the pursuit outweighed the caloric value of the kill. To hunt forever was to violate the laws of thermodynamics. It was a poetic exaggeration. It had to be. And yet the cold vibration in his chest remained. He looked at the holographic map of the galaxy, the vast, dark emptiness of the void of dust staring back at him like an unblinking eye. The humans were there, silent, moving their slow, bulky ships between asteroids, digging, building, waiting. They did not broadcast loud anthems of conquest. They did not posture. They simply were. "Very well," Moloch said, his voice cutting through the noise, silencing the chamber instantly. He made a decision based on political survival rather than strategic wisdom. If he denied Krail, he would look weak, and a weak exarch was a dead exarch. "You may take the vanguard, Sub-Commander, but you will not burn the outposts. You will secure them. You will capture a vessel intact. We must understand why the Vorax feared them before we commit the full might of the Empire to their extermination. Bring me a human, bring me their archives. If they are prey, we shall feast, but if they are the trap, we must know before the jaws snap shut." Krail bowed, a gesture of mocking obedience, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "It shall be done, High Exarch. The galaxy belongs to the strong." The council dispersed, the holographic lights fading, leaving Moloch alone in the center of the vast chamber. He turned back to the transparency field, looking out at the stars. He felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if he had just stepped off a cliff and was waiting for the sensation of falling to register. The warning slate lay on the console, the ancient glyphs dimming. The dominion they forgot. Who had forgotten? The galaxy? Or the humans themselves? Moloch deactivated the console, but the unease followed him into the shadows. He had authorized the first strike. The die was cast. Somewhere in the deep dark, the clock had started ticking, though he did not yet know how much time was left on the face. The attack on the human outpost known as Tycho 7 was brief, violent, and flawlessly executed by Ethel Guardian standards. The Vanguard dropped out of warp space with the screaming tear of reality that characterized their drive technology, their ships bristling with plasma lances and boarding torpedoes. They descended upon the mining station like a swarm of locusts, bypassing the passive sensor buoys and jamming the distress frequencies with white noise. Krail watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Talon of Void, his hearts pounding with the exhilaration of the hunt. The human defenses were laughable automated turrets with slow tracking speeds, particle shields that collapsed under the first volley of heavy plasma. There was no glory in this, only butchery. The station breached, atmosphere venting into the void in crystalline plumes. Krail's boarding parties swept through the corridors, encountering minimal resistance. The humans they found were not soldiers. They were engineers, scientists, miners. They wore vacuum suits that looked like bulky industrial equipment, not armor. They died easily. Too easily. They did not fight with the fury of a cornered beast. They fought with a strange, methodical desperation, sealing bulkheads, deleting data cores, prioritizing destruction of their own equipment over the saving of their own lives. It was puzzling. When the Ethelgard warriors burst into the command center, they found the station commander, a human female with graying hair and eyes that held no terror, only a cold, hard resolve. She stood by the central console, her hand hovering over a manual purge lever. "Halt," Krail's voice boomed through the translator of his lead shock trooper. "Surrender and you will be processed as labor. Resist and you will be biomass." The human commander looked at the towering armored insectoid, then looked at the tactical display showing the ruin of her station. She did not scream. She did not beg. She simply keyed a sequence into the console. You should have read the marker buoys, she said, her voice flat, devoid of the panic Krail expected. This is a quarantine zone. You just broke the seal. She pulled the lever. Krail expected the station to self-destruct, but instead a massive pulse of broad-spectrum electromagnetic energy erupted from the station's antenna array. It wasn't a weapon. It was a signal. A single, high-amplitude ping that punched through the jamming and raced out into the dark at superluminal speeds. Then the station commander sat down in her chair, folded her hands, and waited. Krail ordered her captured. They dragged her aboard the Talon, along with 3 other survivors and terabytes of fragmented data. The station was stripped, the isotopes seized, and the Vanguard returned to the Zenith Gate in triumph. Krail laughed at the warning Moloch had given him. The Dominion was nothing but soft flesh and scrap metal. They had called for help, yes, but help was light years away. By the time any human fleet arrived, the Ethelguard would be ready to crush them. Weeks passed. The plunder from Tycho 7 was integrated into the Ethelguard war machine. The prisoners were interrogated, but they spoke little. They did not break under torture in the way other species did. They didn't scream for mercy. They entered a state of dissociation, reciting mathematical constants or poetry, their minds retreating into a fortress of logic that the Ethelguard interrogators could not breach. The station commander, who identified herself only as Director Holloway, sat in her containment cell, staring at the energy barrier with unblinking patience. She ate when fed. She slept in regular intervals. She watched her captors with the analytical gaze of a biologist studying bacteria in a Petri dish. It was unnerving. Moloch visited her once, standing on the other side of the barrier. "Why do you not fear us?" he asked, his curiosity overriding his pride. "We have burned your home. We have enslaved your kin. Your fleet has not come. Your gods are silent." Holloway looked up, her face gaunt but her eyes burning with that strange, cold fire. "We don't have gods, High Exarch," she said softly, "and we don't have a fleet in the way you understand fleets. You think warfare is a thunderstorm, loud, destructive, quick. You think because the sky is clear, you are safe." She stood up and walked to the barrier, placing her hand against the humming field. "We are not the storm. We are the climate. You didn't start a war. You changed the environment, and now you have to live in it." The change began subtly. It was not an invasion. It was a series of anomalies. Deep-range sensors along the Ethelguard perimeter began to malfunction, reporting ghost contacts that vanished upon direct observation. Supply convoys traveling through the lower quadrants reported navigation errors, their slip drives miscalculating by fractions of a percent, dropping them into empty space light years from their destinations, where they drifted until their reserves ran dry. Then the silence began to spread. Listening posts on the edge of the void of dust simply stopped reporting. No distress calls, no signs of battle. They just went offline one by one like candles being snuffed out in a long hallway. The Synod grew restless. Krail demanded permission to launch a full crusade to sweep the void and burn out whatever stealth ships the humans were using. But Moloch hesitated. The pattern was wrong. This wasn't a military counterattack. It was a dismantling. It was as if the infrastructure of the Empire was being systematically eroded by an invisible acid. Then the ship arrived. It did not warp in with a tear in reality. It did not drop from hyperspace. It simply appeared on the sensors of the Crown of Silence, a massive gravitational anomaly sitting just outside the effective range of the station's weapons batteries. It was colossal, a monolith of matte black composite that seemed to drink the ambient starlight, a rectangular slab of geometry that offended the organic curves of Ethelguard aesthetics. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no bridge. It was a brick thrown through the window of their reality. It sat there, motionless, silent. The Ethelguard fleet mobilized Hunder. DS of warships swarming around the station, weapons locked, target scanners painting the intruder with enough radiation to boil a moon. But the intruder did not react. It just hung there, rotating slowly with a period of rotation that matched exactly the heartbeat of a resting human. "Hail them," Moloch ordered, his voice tight. "Demand their surrender." The comms officer, a drone of the technician caste, worked the console. "Open channel, no response, High Exarch. Wait, there is a data stream. It is text only, low bandwidth, archaic." The main screen flickered and words appeared, simple white glyphs against a black background, translated instantly. "We are the sole terms of engagement. We request audience. One vessel, no weapons. We wish to negotiate the terms of your existence." The arrogance of the message sent a shockwave of rage through the Synod. Krail slammed his fist onto the railing. "They mock us. Terms of our existence. Destroy them. Open fire." Moloch raised a hand. "Hold." He looked at the ship. It was named the Auditing, a bureaucratic name, a name devoid of martial glory. "Let them land," Moloch said. If they wish to negotiate in the heart of our power, let them come. We will show them the futility of their defiance. The shuttle that detached from the monolith was a simple, boxy craft, descending through the atmosphere of the Spire world on a pillar of blue ion fire. It landed on the main docking platform, surrounded by 10,000 Ethelgard warriors, their plasma rifles humming. The ramp lowered. There were no power-armored soldiers, no combat mechs, just 3 figures walking down the ramp. They wore suits of dark, woven fabric, tailored and sharp. They carried briefcases. They did not look like warriors. They looked like undertakers. The leader was a man of indeterminate age, his face lined but unscarred, his hair white, his eyes behind spectacles that reflected the glare of the Ethelgard floodlights. He walked with a cane, tapping it rhythmically on the deck plates. He did not look at the thousands of guns pointed at him. He looked at the architecture. He looked at the sky. He walked straight to the escort waiting to take him to the synod. Inside the grand chamber, the atmosphere was thick with hostility. The 3 humans stood in the center of the ring, surrounded by the towering, chitinous forms of the council. Moloch looked down at them from his high podium. "You stand in the heart of the Ethelgard Empire," Moloch announced, his voice amplified to thunderous levels. "You have invaded our space with a single ship. You speak of terms. Explain yourself, human, before I strip the flesh from your bones to see if you are truly as soft as you appear." The human leader adjusted his spectacles and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a physical paper document, an absurdity in an age of holographic data, and placed it on the small lectern in front of him. "My name is Ambassador Valerius," the human said. His voice was not loud, but the acoustic engineering of the chamber carried it perfectly. It was a calm voice, a voice that sounded like it had spent a lifetime reading books in a quiet room. "And I think there has been a misunderstanding. We did not invade your space. You invaded the quarantine, and we are not here to fight a war. We are here to process a violation." "Violation?" Krail sneered from the side. "We took what we wanted. That is the law of the universe, the strong take." Valerius looked at Krail, a look of mild disappointment, like a teacher looking at a slow student. "The law of the universe is entropy, Subcommander. Everything ends. The stars burn out. The galaxies drift apart. Order degrades into chaos. That is the only true law, my people. We learned this a long time ago." Valerius tapped the paper. "You see, you think of us as a young species because you only recently found us. You assume because we live on dirt farms and mine asteroids with pickaxes that we are primitive. But you are looking at the retirement home, not the nursery." A ripple of confusion went through the council. Moloch leaned forward. "Explain." "The Dominion," Valerius said, using the ancient word the Vorax had feared. "It existed 500 million years ago. We spanned this galaxy. We spanned the next 3. We engineered stars. We built ring worlds. We defeated death. We defeated scarcity. We became gods. And do you know what we found?" He paused, looking around the room. The silence was absolute now. "We found that it was boring, and we found that we were dangerous. When you have the power to rewrite physics, you eventually make a mistake that breaks reality. We almost did. Twice. So we made a choice. We decided to retire, to dismantle the great engines, to put the weapons of God-killing power into deep storage, and to live simple lives, to feel the wind, to grow old, to die. We established the quarantine zones to keep the younger, louder species away from the dangerous things we left behind. W. E drew a line in the sand and said, "Do not cross. You crossed it." "Lies," Krail hissed, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "If you were gods, where is your power? Where are your fleets?" "We don't need fleets," Valerius said gently. "We have persistence." He stepped away from the podium, walking slowly around the center of the ring. "Do you know how humans hunted back before we went to the stars? We didn't have claws, we didn't have fangs, we weren't fast, but we could sweat, and we could walk. We would find a gazelle, a creature faster than us in every way, and we would chase it. It would run, and we would walk. It would rest, and we would appear on the horizon. It would run again, panic setting in, its muscles filling with lactic acid, its body overheating. We would just keep walking, carrying water, carrying spears. We would walk until the gazelle's heart exploded. We would walk until it lay down and accepted death. That is what we are. We are the thing that does not stop." He turned back to Moloch. "You destroyed Tycho 7. That was an error, but we are willing to overlook it as a first offense. However, the mining operations you have started in the void, they are drilling into the containment shell of a Class 9 memetic hazard. A weapon we buried there an eon ago. If you wake it up, it won't just kill you. It will consume the concept of you from the information substrate of the universe. We are here to ask you to stop. Politely." "And if we refuse?" Moloch asked, the vibration in his chest now a roaring alarm. Valerius smiled, a sad, tired smile. "Then we will not fight you. We will not engage your fleets in glory. We will simply turn off your lights. We will scramble your navigation data so you can never find your way home. We will introduce viral code into your fabricators so your food tastes like ash. We will dampen the fusion reactions in your stars by a fraction of a percent, just enough to freeze your worlds over 1,000 years. We will dismantle your empire bolt by bolt, and you will never even see the enemy. We will be the entropy in your walls. We will hunt your civilization to extinction, not with fire, but with time. We have plenty of it. Do you? The threat hung in the air, terrifying in its specificity and its calmness. This was not the threat of a warrior. It was the threat of an engineer who knew exactly where the structural weakness of the building was. But Krail could not accept it. The biological imperative was too strong. "Cowards!" he screamed. "They bluff, they use words because they have no steel." He drew his sidearm, a plasma disruptor, and leveled it at Valerius. "I will show you the fragility of your gods." Krail pulled the trigger. The bolt of superheated plasma screamed across the chamber, aimed squarely at Valerius's chest, but it never impacted. A fraction of a second before the bolt hit, the air around the human shimmered. A personal displacement field, invisible until that moment, activated with a sharp crack of thunder. The plasma bolt was caught, redirected, and dissipated into a harmless spray of photons. Simultaneously, the auditing, the ship orbiting above, fired. It did not fire a laser. It fired a precision gravity lance, a beam of focused gravitons that passed through the station's hull without breaking it, passed through the layers of the chamber, and impacted Krail. It didn't explode. It simply increased the localized gravity around the subcommander by a factor of 500. Krail was instantly flattened, his carapace shattering, his body compressed into a dense puck of organic matter on the floor. It happened in less than a heartbeat. One moment he was shouting, the next he was a smear. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the rest of the room. Valerius brushed a speck of imaginary dust from his lapel. "The ship is automated," he apologized. "It has very strict protocols regarding the safety of diplomatic staff. As I was saying, the containment shell." Malak stared at the remains of his subcommander. The display of power was absolute, it was effortless. The humans hadn't even flinched. They possessed technology that could manipulate gravity with pinpoint accuracy from orbit, yet they chose to walk in with briefcases. The horror of the realization washed over him. The Vorak's warning had been an understatement. They will hunt you forever, because to them a war of 1,000 years was just a project, a chore. We accept the terms," Malak stammered, his mandibles trembling. "We will withdraw from the void. We will pay reparations for Tycho 7. We will respect the quarantine." "Good," Valerius said, closing his briefcase. "But there is a complication. Our sensors indicate that before your fleet withdrew, one of your deep-core drills penetrated the crust of the planetoid designated X-99. You didn't just wake the sleeper. You let it out." The lights in the synod flickered. A deep, resonant sound, like a bell tolling underwater, vibrated through the station's hull. It wasn't coming from the human ship. It was coming from the void. What did we let out?" Malak whispered. Valerius looked grim. "We call it the swarm of silence. It's a self-replicating nanotechnological construct designed to erase history. It eats data. Then it eats the biology that created the data. It's hungry, and you just rang the dinner bell." He tapped his cane on the floor. "The negotiations are over. Now we move to the alliance phase, because if we don't stop it, there won't be an Ethelgard empire to sanction. There won't be anything." The transition from enemies to reluctant allies was jarring and chaotic. The Ethelgard fleet, once poised to conquer, was now in a panicked defensive formation. The auditing was no longer a silent monolith. It was acting as a command hub, coordinating data streams that the Ethelgard computers couldn't even process. Valerius stood in the Ethelgard Strategic Command Center, watching the tactical holograms. A cloud of darkness was expanding from the void of dust. It wasn't a ship. It was a cloud of microscopic machines, billions of trillions of them, moving as a hive mind. They stripped the stars they passed of their solar corona, using the energy to replicate. They were consuming the light itself. "How do we fight that?" Malak asked, watching the terror unfold. "Our weapons are useless. Plasma just feeds it energy." "You don't fight it with power," Valerius said, his eyes tracking the swarm. "You fight it with logic. It's a computer, a very old, very angry computer. We need to upload a patch, a kill code." "And how do we deliver this code?" "Manually," Valerius said. "We have to fly into the center of the cloud to the prime node and inject the data physically. Remote transmission is impossible. The swarm jams everything." "That is suicide," Malak said. "It is necessary," Valerius corrected. "My ship, the Auditing, is built for this. It has armor made of collapsed matter. It can survive inside the swarm for approximately 12 minutes. That is enough time, but we need a distracted swarm. We need you to draw its fire." Moloch looked at the human. "You want us to act as bait." "I want you to be warriors," Valerius said. "You wanted a war, you wanted glory. Here it is, the greatest enemy you will ever face, death itself. Keep it busy. Let us do our work, or we all die." The Battle of the Void was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was a slaughter, a desperate holding action against a tide of gray goo that ate metal and flesh alike. The Ethelgard fleet, guided by Moloch, charged the swarm. They fired everything they had: nuclear torpedoes, plasma streams, antimatter charges. The explosions rippled across the face of the cloud, disrupting its cohesion, forcing it to reconfigure. Ships were consumed instantly, their hulls turning to dust, their crews silenced before they could scream. But they bought time. They drew the tendrils of the swarm toward them, creating a path for the Auditing. On board the human vessel, the atmosphere was calm. Valerius sat in the captain's chair, watching the hull integrity drop. 90%, 80%. The sound of the swarm eating the outer layers of the ship was like the sound of sandblasting, a constant, grinding roar. "Steady," he murmured to his crew. "Maintain trajectory." The humans worked with that same terrifying, emotionless efficiency. They were sailing into the mouth of hell, and they were checking their readouts as if they were running a simulation. They breached the outer layer of the swarm. The internal sensors showed a landscape of nightmare, great geometric shapes forming and dissolving, the swarm trying to calculate a defense. The Auditing pushed through, its engines burning with a violet light. They reached the prime node, a moon-sized sphere of pure, undulating machine matter. "Deploying the injector," the tactical officer announced. A massive probe shot out from the Auditing, smashing into the surface of the node. It didn't explode, it burrowed. Deep inside, it released a payload not of explosives, but of information, a logical paradox, a mathematical sequence that forced the swarm to calculate the final digit of pi, a loop. The effect was instantaneous. The swarm froze, the grinding noise stopped. The cloud lost its cohesion, drifting apart into inert dust. The kill code had worked. The ancient weapon went back to sleep. The Auditing limped out of the cloud, its hull pitted and scarred, bleeding atmosphere. The Ethelgard fleet was decimated. Half their ships were gone, but they were alive. Moloch stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human vessel. He felt a profound sense of humility. He had called them soft, he had called them prey, but he had seen them walk into the fire without hesitation. They didn't fight for glory. They fought because it was their job. They were the custodians of the galaxy, the janitors of the apocalypse. Days later, back at the Crown of Silink, the mood was somber. The treaty was signed. The Ethelgard would withdraw from the sector. They would pay the reparations, but more than that, they would learn. Valerius stood before the Synod one last time. He looked tired. "You did well," he said to Moloch. "Your people have courage, unfocused but potent. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when you have grown up a little, you can join the Dominion. We could use some help on the perimeter." "Join you?" Moloch asked. "To hunt." "To watch," Valerius said. "To make sure the nightmares stay asleep. To be the wall between the light and the dark." "And the warning?" Moloch asked. "The one the Voreks left, they will hunt you forever." Valerius smiled, and for the first time it was a genuine, warm smile. "We only hunt the things that threaten the garden, High Exarch. Be a gardener, not a wolf, and you have nothing to fear from us." The humans left as quietly as they had arrived. The Auditing faded into the black, vanishing from sensors, but the Ethelgard were changed. They looked at the stars differently now. They did not see a hunting ground. They saw a responsibility. They saw the vast, terrifying depth of time, and they knew that somewhere in the dark the humans were walking, ceaselessly, endlessly, keeping the watch. And for the first time in their history, the predators of the Ethelgard felt safe, knowing that the ultimate hunter was on their side. Years turned into decades, and decades into centuries. The story of the human war, which was not a war but a correction, became the foundational myth of the new Ethelgard society. They dismantled their aggressive expansion fleets and repurposed them for exploration and defense. They built archives instead of armories. Moloch, who ruled for another 200 cycles, became known not as Moloch the Conqueror, but Moloch the Wise. He spent his twilight years staring into the void of dust, watching the silent patrols of the human ships that occasionally drifted through the sensors, ghost-like and distant. He understood now the true meaning of power. Power was not the ability to destroy, it was the ability to endure. The humans had endured the death of their own gods, the collapse of their own golden age, and the burden of guarding the galaxy's deadliest secrets. They carried the weight of eternity on their shoulders, and they did not buckle. The Ethelgard learned to mimic this persistence. They began to terraform the worlds they had once stripped, planting forests where they had left craters. It was slow work. It took generations to see the results, but they kept at it. They learned the human art of the long march. When a plague struck the outer colonies, they did not purge the infected. They worked tirelessly for 20 years to find a cure, never giving up, hunting the solution with the same ferocity they once hunted prey. When a star in a neighboring system began to destabilize, threatening a primitive civilization, the Ethelgard did not ignore it. They spent a century building a stellar stabilizer, a project that consumed half their economy, just to save a species that didn't even know they existed. They did it because that is what the Dominion would have done. One day, a signal arrived from deep space. It was not a warning this time. It was an invitation, a set of coordinates leading to a region of space far beyond the Ethelgard borders in the spiral arm where the ancient stars clustered. Malak's successor, High Exarch Thraka, assembled a diplomatic vessel. She did not send a warship. She sent a ship of white ceramic and glass, unarmed, named the Patience. They traveled for months, moving through jump gates and silent voids until they reached the coordinates. There, floating in the darkness, was a megastructure of impossible scale. A ring world encompassing a yellow star, its surface area millions of times greater than any planet. It was lush, green, teeming with life. And in orbit around it were thousands of ships. Not just human ships, but ships of strange designs, crystalline shards, organic biovessels, clouds of intelligent gas. It was a gathering of species. A human vessel intercepted the Patience. It was the auditing, looking exactly as it had centuries ago, untouched by time. The voice that came over the comms was not Valerius, but it carried the same calm cadence. "Welcome, Ethelgard. You have shown the capacity for growth. You have shown the capacity for stewardship. We have been watching." Thraka felt a swell of pride in her thoracic cavity. "We have tried to follow the path," she said. "The path has no end," the human voice replied. "But it is better to walk it with company. We are convening the Council of Preservation. There is a threat rising in the Andromeda galaxy, something that consumes entropy, something that wants to turn the lights out forever. We are gathering the hunters. We need those who do not stop." "We are ready," Thraka said. "We can fight." "Good," the human said, "but remember, we do not fight to conquer. We fight to ensure that there is a tomorrow. Join us. The long march continues." As the Patience docked with the ring world, Thraka looked out at the vast assembly of civilizations. She realized that the Dominion they forgot was never a forgotten empire. It was a test, a filter. The humans had set up the galaxy to weed out the short-sighted, the cruel, the impatient. Only those who learned to value the future over the present, who learned to build rather than burn, were invited to the true table. The Ethelgard had passed. They were no longer just predators. They were guardians. And as they joined the fleet that would sail toward Andromeda to face the encroaching dark, they knew they would not fail, for they were pack-bonded with the humans now. And humans hunted forever.